Welcome to the Stamford FinTech MeetUp, and thank you for joining us today. I'm George Ravitch, president of Ravco Marketing, a strategic marketing consultancy focused on FinTech, and I'm one of the leaders of the Stamford FinTech MeetUp group that's been around since 2017 and has over 600 members. Today we have a special treat, two very successful serial entrepreneurs who are going to share their knowledge and experience in starting and building FinTech companies, and let me introduce them now. First is Chris Agus. He's currently a CEO of Core Chain Technologies, a B2B payments platform built on blockchain that helps businesses pay more quickly and efficiently while unlocking working capital from unpaid invoices. I'm hearing some feedback. Can you put yourselves on mute? Thank you. Chris was the founder of Encentra, a developer of ATM and remote deposit capture solutions for regional banks, which was acquired by Jack Henry. And he was the founder of Net Abacus, a developer of web-based applications to small and medium-sized businesses that competed with NetSuite. He exited that company through the sale to Rivio. And between those startups, Chris was at Visa, MasterCard, and a couple of other well-known companies. Also with us today is Dan Schley, currently the managing partner of Dolphin 2 Capital, which conceives, invests, and actively participates in startups and early stage companies across a variety of industries. Dan was the chairman and CEO of Foundation Source, a Fairfield, Connecticut-based company that is the nation's leading provider of support services for private foundations. He was the founder of Financial Fusion, one of the first consumer online banking applications, which was sold to Sybase, and where I was employee number 18, and the founder of Mecca Software, one of the first personal financial management software applications ever. Welcome to you both, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, George.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have 5 big questions that we want answered. So we're going to jump right into that. And for anyone who's listening, if you'd like to ask a question, just send it to me through the chat and I will ask for you. Okay? So question number 1, do I have the right idea? Henry Ford said if he asked people what they wanted, they would say a faster horse. So people don't always know what the right answer is. So are there signals for whether it's right or not? And what are the key questions that you should be asking yourself? Chris, you want to take the lead on that?
Chris, you're on mute.
Apologies for that. I thought I had taken that off a while ago. Anyway, I think, George, that's a very, very key question for any entrepreneur. And I think probably the way to answer that question best is to actually ask a precursor question, which is, how did I come about the idea that I have at hand? In my experience, a lot of folks who want to go down the entrepreneurial path start by declaring themselves as passionate entrepreneurs, and then they start to look for problems to solve to which they can apply their entrepreneurial zeal, if you will. But unfortunately, and I know this is a disappointment, especially for a lot of potential entrepreneurs that are perhaps just coming out of school or just coming out of other career experiences, in my experience, the path to entrepreneurship is not to be an entrepreneur looking for ideas. It's to be actively engaged in the world, living life experiences and experiencing problems and opportunities. And literally all 3 of the companies that I've founded from scratch have shared that characteristic, in that I was involved in a business or an undertaking of some sort, and I came across some problems that I really wanted to solve, tried to see what solutions might be available in the marketplace, and fortunately for me, didn't find them. And perhaps equally fortunately, for each of the problems that I uncovered, I realized that there were some nascent technologies that were in the process of emerging that could be used to help address some of those problems, whether it was digital marketing technology or software as a service technology, or now, in the case of Core Chain, blockchain technology. So I think the first and foremost step in understanding, do I have the right idea, is understanding, did it come to me through direct experience of some sort of problem and opportunity versus was I actually out looking for it at the time?
So knowing the problem that exists in the marketplace firsthand, I think what you're trying to say is really very important, really key.
Yes, absolutely. That's the key point. Having that firsthand knowledge of the problem as it exists, which to me, that depth can really only come from real world experience down in the trenches, as opposed to being a 10,000-foot observer out looking for problems to apply entrepreneurial zeal towards.
Dan, are you with us?
Yes, George.
Okay, we lost your video, but Dan, do you want to add something to that? Oh, here you go. You want to add something?
It's interesting. It's hearing what Chris had to say. Do I have the right idea? It's interesting about that question is, that's the essence of entrepreneurship. You never know until you try. So the best you can do is think you have the right idea. But the problem today, in today's environment, is that product life cycles are very, very short. And so you may have the right idea today, but by the time you execute, it's tomorrow. The market has moved on. And so it sort of gets into the question of timing. You have to understand the market well enough to say not what's right today, but where's the market going? And to really sort of project out 3 months, 6 months, 3 years, 6 years, and say, I'm looking at a market today and it's headed there. And if I aim downstream, I'm going to hit that market. Because I think to try to plan for the right idea today, you run the risk of being left at the altar. It's tricky, very tricky.
So let's look at it on the other side of that coin, which is, how do you know you have the wrong idea? How would you know that, after doing some studying on the topic or knowing firsthand, whatever the case may be, how do you get to the point where you say this is not the right idea?
Well, I think first question, George, is anybody else doing it? It's important to understand, what's the competition? Are other people trying this idea or variations on this idea? Mm-hmm. If they are, that doesn't mean there's no room for you, but it's a litmus test to see whether people perceive there to be a market. And, the second question is, have others tried and failed? And if they tried and failed, is it because there really wasn't a market or because they didn't approach the market correctly? We started a company a couple of years ago developing technology to reduce aerodynamic drag behind long haul trucks. We're talking about tractor trailer trucks. And, there's tremendous momentum to reducing fuel burn and reducing the carbon footprint. There are a number of people who have tried and failed to develop that technology. And in this company, we took a hard look at it and realized it was the right idea, the wrong execution, and the wrong time. And so there's timing and there's also execution. But fundamentally, not only was the market there, was it viable, was there demand, but the momentum is headed in that direction. And so we took the risk to start the company.
So would you say that, so I think what you're saying is, if I could summarize, is that looking at the marketplace, looking at whether there are competitors or not, and then analyzing that about whether competitors have got maybe the right idea but wrong execution or what have you, that it's looking at the marketplace today and seeing what's out there and trying to dissect it, because it could be either the wrong idea or it could be the right idea just executed poorly.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, the first final question is there genuine demand for a product people will pay for? I mean, a lot of times there's demand for products people won't pay for. Talk about, freemium, right? I mean, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of apps that are fantastic, but nobody will pay a nickel for them. So, is there real demand? There was a famous, one of the founders of venture capital and private equity, a famous guy out in Silicon Valley named Don Valentine. He basically was one of the founders of venture capital. And his famous line was, who needs it? Why do I need this? Not why do I want it? Why do I need this? So, establishing that there truly is a market, a viable market where there's demand, I think a mass market, people will pay for the product or service you're offering. Then who else is trying to do it? Is anyone trying to do it? If not, why not? Maybe they haven't thought of it. You know, the analogy you said earlier is, you know, give me a faster horse. Makes a lot of sense. And there are a lot of companies that we've started, and people will say, well, nobody's asking for that. And the reason was because nobody knew about it. Nobody understood the value proposition. When we were early days of early days of the software industry, we were developing software and technology to solve problems that people didn't know they had. They didn't understand it.
Yeah, you both are involved in things like that, right? I mean, Dan, when you were doing a personal financial management software back in the 80s, you know, there really wasn't a lot of demand for that. People didn't even have computers then. And today, Chris, you're working on blockchain for payments and to speed up cash flow. You know, there's demand for that, but not really. I mean, people don't know how to use blockchain for that purpose. So a lot of times, I think you're blazing you're blazing new trails, and there really is no sign from the marketplace. Is this the right idea?
Certainly, you know, there's a famous quote from Steve Jobs talking about, you know, would the iPhone or the iPod ever have come out of a traditional consumer research focus group? And the answer is absolutely not, because people didn't know that they needed this product until it existed. And obviously, once he created it, there turned out to be huge latent demand once people realized what it could do for them. So, you know, that's really where you see, to Dan's point, some of the benefit of seeing others attempting to approach the market in similar ways. Gives you some validation that there may be some need. It certainly isn't proof, but it's an evidence marker.
Yeah, I like the conclusions here. Just like you said, Chris, that people could be trying it or, you know, nipping around the edges. Maybe you have the right idea, and having firsthand experience understanding the problem makes a lot of sense as well. I think that's good. Okay, let's go on to the next.
Just one last point to Dan's, to the point that Dan raised as well. The idea that most entrepreneurs start with rarely is what they ultimately end up launching, either because as they go from the process of ideation to actually building their first product to ultimately commercializing that product, they realize that the demand may be in a slightly different place from where they are, or competitors may emerge and they may need to pivot, or even better adjacent opportunities may come up. So part of having the right idea as well is not being too rigid. You don't want to be all over the place and be willy-nilly, but be willing to have some flexibility that you may be onto something, but you may not have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed in your idea, and you may have to make some edits as you go forward.
Hey, can I just jump in? I want to give you a perfect example of that. You're going to laugh at this. And George was part of the company. We started this company back in 1995 called Home Financial Network, a technology company to automate and simplify this idea of banking through a telephone wire. In the early days, basically the early days of modems and the early days of PC banking. And when we were writing the business plan, somebody said to me, hey, when you're trying to raise capital, put the word internet in there. I hear it's going to be big someday. So,
and one day.
Yeah, that's right. $28 million of spending later, we pivoted.
All you have to do is drive down the post road in Westport to see the retail store patio.com and wonder how they ended up with that name.
Yeah, sure.
Very smart.
Example of that.
You know, Chris, just to your point, I know that from just my experiences, I talk to dozens of startups and young companies every week. And just like you're saying, I think not only do you need to be flexible and pivot, because rarely do you get the exact right idea first time. It always needs to evolve. But I think also what's important to understand is that investors, private equity firms, completely understand that and expect that. So, I mean, it's not bad if you're pitching business and you have investors that you need to pivot in some way. I think that's part of the game. I think everybody expects that.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Okay, let's go on to the next question. Is it the right time? Here's a slide from a guy named Bill Gross, who was famous for starting the Idea Lab. He's a very famous entrepreneur. And basically, he said he did a survey of 200 different companies and startups, that is, and found that really the number one issue is timing. So Dan, back to your point, mentioned it a little bit earlier, is timing, is it the right time? Tell us a little bit about that. Again, how do you know whether you're right or you're wrong, meaning is it the right time or not? Give us some insight on that.
You know, it's like when you're standing on top of the 10-meter platform above that swimming pool and somebody says, it's time to go. And you say, you know, is it time to jump, right? And you're terrified and it's time to go. I have an interesting perspective on this, George. I've given a lot of speeches over the years about entrepreneurship. And I always say that it's luck, timing, and talent in that order. I put luck before timing. Luck, timing, and talent in that order. And anybody who thinks otherwise is doomed to find out the hard way. So, you know, I would say timing, a lot of timing is luck. You can time something because you believe that market opportunity is here today, right? But the markets shift so quickly that you have to be lucky that you really picked the right time. So, for example, we started Home Financial Network. We thought the timing was perfect. There was a great interest in the banking community for PC banking. So along comes the internet, and we pivoted, and we rode that wave, as you know. We got lucky. So our timing was prescient, but we were lucky. You know, over the years, you know, I've started lots and lots of companies, and I always believe that time is right. And for the most part, I've been right, but there've been times where I've been completely wrong. So I think you have to understand what's the market I'm looking at? What's the market I'm interested in? What is the product or service that I think meets the market need? And you go through the questions about look at the market, study the market potential, the consumer demand, whatever the case may be. You look at the competition, you gauge the competition, including those who've tried and failed. You judge whether or not you have sufficient capital or whether through friends and family you can cobble together the capital. And if all of those 10 pins line up, you throw the ball down the alley. And then you have to be lucky that it all hits just right. So, you know, he can say, Bill Gross, the timing, 42% of it will say it's timing, but that doesn't mean that therefore the answer is timing. Timing is the moment in time you chose to start the business, and you're going to be lucky if your timing was right. I truly believe that.
Okay. Chris, you want to add to your point of view?
There's certainly no question that timing can be a blessing and a curse. I know for one of our partners, channel partners at CoreChain, one of their principals has a brother that in late February, early March was preparing to launch with Richard Branson the new Virgin Cruises brand. And turned out that late February, early March of this year was not a great time to launch a new cruise line.
For sure.
So I think that's an example of how an externalities in timing can certainly be very challenging, or if in some cases perhaps fatal to overcome. I do think that timing, as Bill Gross described it, is a key driver of success, as is luck. I think luck is an element to all 5 of these factors. Are you lucky enough to have the right timing? Are you lucky enough to meet the right people, to see the right things, to develop the right business model at the right time? But I think timing is also a bit of a skill set. And it kind of goes back to actually the prior question of where is this a good idea? A part of what qualifies a good idea is a sense that the market is moving in a given direction. And to to Dan's earlier point, other competitors are emerging, or activity is taking place in the space that indicates market demand. But if timing is if luck is not really controllable and timing is only somewhat controllable, what of these things can you really control? And I think the team aspect can't be overstated. Ideas are cheap. Execution is tough. There are lots of ideas, lots of concepts, lots of people looking to start different types of businesses out there. Only a fraction of them succeed. If you can't control timing, then what can you control for? You can control who you bring into the equation with you. So for each of my startups, I've spent an enormous amount of time working with my founding teams to figure out who were the right people, and in some cases, who were not the right people to do business with. So I would encourage entrepreneurs out there that are thinking about starting companies to spend a lot of time carefully cultivating and culling the partners and co-founders that you want to work with to start a company, because odds are that's the most highly controllable factor that will determine your success or failure in the marketplace.
Great point. Great point. Okay, let's move on. Let me go to the next question. Where do I begin? How do I sequence key activities? Chris, take us through your thinking on that.
So it's kind of interesting. It dovetails to actually what I just said. So every time that I have identified what I thought was an unmet market need, the first step I've taken around idea validation is to talk to a lot of people to get opinions about whether or not the concept or opportunity I've identified really exists. And to George's point, also doing some desk research to see what our analysts saying about the space, what competitors may be emerging, what kind of investment may be going on against that space, all to try and get a sense of those indicators. And once I've satisfied myself that, yeah, that's a reasonable conclusion that there may be something here, the next and most important step is to build what I call an interest group, which are groups of folks that have an interest in contributing to the project, if you will, and potentially getting involved in building out the company. So these could range from potential advisors to potential investors to potential co-founders. And I try and pull together a broad group of folks to see if I can drive some excitement amongst them in pursuing a concept. Actually, interestingly enough, my most recent, current startup, CoreChain, I actually started that process here in Stamford at the very first Stamford Innovation Week back in 2018. And that was really my launching point for CoreChain, because I was able to find enough wise or foolish co-conspirators, if you will, to begin to achieve critical mass towards building out a company. So that first step, after you validate ideas, which is the second step of, can I find enough interest? Can I find people who want to do this with me, invest in me, advise me? That to me is the most important step once you get past the desk research phase.
How about after that? Because there are a lot of things that come after that, whether it's raising money or somehow bootstrapping an MVP. Tell me a little bit about that, your thinking on that.
Well, so in the current early stage funding marketplace, having a minimum viable product and some sort of customer traction or revenue activity is a very key benefit. That's really what separates companies from what's typically known in the industry parlance, the pre-seed phase, which is really we have a concept but no product and no customers yet, to a seed stage company where we not only have a concept, but at least we have the makings of a product. It may not be the whole thing, but it's some portion of the thing. And we have some customers that are either implementing it or at least talking to us and have an interest in implementing it. So the next step in my mind, after you put together that interest group, is to point that interest group towards a couple of deliverables along the lines of building out some sort of a proof of concept, some sort of an MVP, something that you can actually show to customers, and that if it's a technical product, can actually prove out the hypotheses that you have. This is exactly what we're doing with CoreChain in terms of leveraging blockchain technology. and then also seeing what customers you can secure. Of course, that goes back to that very first step of validating the market. Nothing validates a market more than somebody who's willing to pay real money to get access to the solution. So that's the next key phase post the interest group, is to start to build out some kind of a proof of concept or MVP that you can show and will prove that the product can perform, and start to find that first customer that is willing to pay money to leverage that capability.
Okay, and would you say all of that happens before you go on a fundraising binge?
Well, again, that goes back to what type of funding that you're looking for. Concepts can be funded, although typically the funding is relatively minimal. And institutional investors today, venture capital firms, private equity shops, those sorts of things, unless you're a prior entrepreneur that they've worked with, they tend to not be that interested in funding ideas. What gets them excited is a product that's been built, even if it's only 5 or 10% of the end product, and a customer that they can talk to who says, yes, I'm willing to pay money for this because this solves a real problem for me. Mm-hmm. At that point, you're in a much better shape to go out and raise institutional venture capital or private equity funding than strictly a concept.
Okay. Dan, you want to answer that?
No, I think that's pretty thorough. I mean, you clearly you start out with an idea. You research a market, you research the competition, you determine whether or not there is an opportunity, you believe there's an opportunity. For me, then I start to popularize that opportunity with people I know and respect. Most of them will tell me it's a stupid idea. That never stopped me. And you keep on going, and the more people you talk to, the more you get a feel for a market. A lot of people have very strong opinions, but they all want to be entrepreneurs. So I think it's really pretty basic. It's basic business judgment. Do I have an idea? Is it viable? Is my understanding of the market valid? Is there a need for this? If somebody could do it, and then can I? I think it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. And how about some of the other activities? Meaning, once you've got your MVP, once you've got your couple of customers, reference customers, take me through that a little bit. The early days of hiring people, meaning when you're really, maybe even after you've got initial funding, seed funding, what's the sequence there in terms of spending money? Obviously, you get some money, and then you have a choice. Do you hire people? Do you rent office space? Where do you spend the seed money in the very early days there?
So I think the key to understanding that is understanding where you need to, where you need to be as a company to essentially raise your next round of financing. So if you think about the sequence of at least venture funded technology and similar companies, they tend to follow a phased approach that's typically delineated by the notion of a series of stock that's been issued to particular investors. And so you might start with a small pre-seed round, as I mentioned earlier. Then you may raise a seed round, and then what's known as a Series A, followed by a Series B. And by the time you get to Series C or Series D, ideally you're either preparing to go public in an initial public offering, or you're exploring acquisition opportunities from potential suitors. So if you've gotten past the pre-seed stage where you have some notion of a product and some notion of customer, and you've raised a seed round, then you have to think about what are the milestone and gating issues for that next round post the seed round, which typically is going to be the Series A. And there are actually some fairly well-defined benchmarks, and you can find a lot of this information online, at least how venture capital investors here in the United States think about what needs to be in place at a given series point to achieve investment. So if you've raised that seed round, maybe that's $1 million, say, or 2 or 3 million. The next phase will be a Series A that could be, say, 5 to 7 million. but the criteria that investors are going to look for at that point to fund a Series A is, have you validated a market thoroughly with multiple customers? Do you have a real product that is performing that customers will provide testimonial to? And probably most importantly, have you figured out how to scale the customer base such that if we come in as investors into a Series A, we can insert capital into the company and top line revenue comes out because you figured out who your customers are and how to sell this. So really what I'm investing in is your go-to-market to enable you to scale up. Obviously, you're continuing to build out the product and your support services and whatnot, but really at the Series A point, it's about inserting capital and ramping top-line revenue growth dramatically. So to kind of answer that question, what you have to think about is the next steps from the time you raise that seed round to the time you get ready to raise that Series A is, what is my plan to go from the concept here today with a mini product, a customer, to a robust product, multiple customers, and again, a proven plan for how we can scale revenue if investors insert additional capital in a Series A round.
But let me ask
Chris, that was well
difficult
stated,
question.
by the way. Well
Sorry?
stated. That was well
Thank you.
stated.
Let me ask a difficult question, which is if you're in the early days, whatever round you're in, meaning pre-seed or seed, you've only got a certain amount of money. Do you put the money into a developer who's going to build out the product, or do you put your money into a salesperson who's going to go get you customers?
Dan, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
George, I hate to say that it depends. I mean, you clearly need to have a product that's viable enough to be able to, even if it's in beta form, to show customers. You've got to have something. I mean, you can raise money off of an idea, but it's pretty tough to sell on an idea. You have to sell with something tangible. So, I mean, I think at a minimum, and by the way, you can spend a lot of money investing in sales and marketing ahead of the curve and blow a lot of money before you have a product, because invariably you're going to develop the product. It's not going to be right. You're going to redevelop it. You're going to go back into development. You're going to go into QA. You got to pivot. You got to shift. You got to adjust. So, I think that it's critical for an entrepreneur to look at their next nickel as their last. As soon as I see somebody has an office, I figure they're dead. You can run a virtual company. You've got the internet, you've got iPads, you've got iPhones. There's a lot of ways to keep your overhead to zero. You got to have a product or a product plan or a spec or some proof point that you're going to take out to a customer. And the customer will say, if you build it, I will buy it. So I guess my answer is I need enough in your R&D of sort of your typecasting in a certain type of business, but you have to have enough of a product concept, viable, not theoretical,
Right.
to before you start selling.
Okay.
And
Great
I would just
question.
add to that, you can certainly get expressions of interest from customers on concepts, but generally customers that are working with early stage companies can be pretty savvy businesses, and they're not going to write a check for a spec. They'll write a check for something that solves a real problem for them, which means you have to have a product and not just a PowerPoint deck or a slideware demo.
Just to add to that, there are situations where the customer is willing to invest, right? Where you bring that product. I mean, it's a developed idea. It maybe is a demo rather than a real functioning product. And they're willing to invest to be your first customer because they would like it created to their specs. And so they're the first or one or two customers in that know that here's a good development shop. In a sense, they look at it as a development shop, maybe as an alternative to an internal development, and they could invest because they want that kind of service.
That's absolutely right. But I will tell you from firsthand experience, multiple times over, having been to this movie more times than I can count, that is a very delicate line to walk in terms of how do you build an independent company that can chart its own path forward without becoming somebody else's captive development shop, exactly as you said. Because walking that line is the difference between creating sustainable enterprise value for yourself, and the opposite is ultimately becoming an acqui-hire type situation.
Right.
Where somebody buys you just to get your folks in. Unfortunately, there's no enterprise value created.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Do I have the leadership traits needed for a startup? Dan, you want to take the lead on this? I mean, who do you look for? What kind of people do you look for? Do you look for people that have the same opinions as you or opposite opinions? What about
Are you talking about the lead bird or other people on your team?
Other people on the team, not only hiring the right people, but also having the leadership skills. Maybe it's best to define what those leadership skills are beyond just being able to be a good judge of people for the people you're going to hire. What are the leadership skills?
George, interesting question, because the way you frame the question is, do I have the leadership traits, right?
Yeah.
And, I want to start a company. Do I have what it takes?
Right.
And I would say, you have to have an absolute conviction in your strategy, in your vision, in your market. You have to have absolute conviction, and that's a leadership trait. I absolutely believe my strategy and vision is on the mark. It's unequivocal. The second, I think, is the word that comes to mind is an indefatigable attitude, meaning I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to work 24/7. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. You have to have that tenacity. That's a leadership tenacity. This, I sink my teeth in to the problem like a pit bull, and I do not let go. That's a clear leadership trait. And then, of course, the ability to communicate or articulate your idea to inspire people, which can be prospective employees, can be customers, can be investors. Are you inspirational? Not so much you as a person, but is your idea. Can you communicate and convey your idea in a manner that inspires other people to follow you? Someone else said, what's the definition of a leader? And my answer is, a leader is the person other people follow. So, I think those are the three keys. Those are the three keys, because you start out with a blank sheet of paper. You have to have the tenacity to define, design, and develop a product, a business plan, a strategy, a vision. You have to go at it with sort of relentless determination. Failure is not an option. You're the one that's carrying the flag into the valley of death, because you're gonna right the wrong. I think those are the keys. I'll stop right there. If you get past those three hurdles, you're a long way down the path.
Okay.
I think that's another aspect that's built into all three of those, really, and it's what I would characterize as resiliency. Because the reality is, the path to success for the vast majority of early stage companies and startups is not the linear hockey stick evolution that I think is romanticized or popularized. Certainly we've all heard stories of companies that have had enough good luck and timing, as well as skill, to rocket from concept to unicorn valuation within a very short period of time, have lots of customers, have lots of funding, have lots of revenue. In my experience, those companies are exceedingly rare. Much more likely is I start a company, I get my MVP with my first customer, and something goes wrong. I lose the customer, the MVP doesn't work, or both of those things are working, and some frame-breaking externality takes place that I have to find my way to survival through. And in fact, that's happened to me with all three of my scratch startups. The first one, we had to survive and figure out how to thrive in the middle of the dot-com bust back in early 2000. Second company, we had to figure out how to survive 9/11. We actually lost one of our hardware installations. This was the retail bank automation company. One of our hardware installations was in Tower 2 at McGraw-Hill. So I had to recover from that. And now here, 20 years later, we're doing trying to build core chain in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And each of those times we've managed to essentially find a way to, as one of my partners from Incenta way back when used to say, make lemonade out of lemons. So I think the characteristic of being able to certainly be disappointed and be a little bit lost for breath when you take a gut punch, but then having the ability to come back from that gut punch, catch your breath, and say, okay, we got to figure out a new way, new path forward, different recipe for the lemonade than we were anticipating. That, to me, having that resiliency characteristic is a very high indicator of likelihood for success.
Well said. So I think when we were talking earlier about these different traits, you also mentioned something about the fear of failing and being able to overcome that. You want to elaborate on that?
So part of resiliency in my mind is knowing that when you're going into the ring, you're going to take a punch. So, and you're going to have to, it's going to hurt and you're going to have to get past it. If you're afraid to take a punch, then you shouldn't be in the ring because it's part of the job. The boxer gets in there and takes some punches and hopefully delivers more punches than they take, but don't get into the ring expecting that it's going to be a path to roses, because no, there are going to be some gut punches along the way. So you can't be afraid to fail. The only thing that you really should be afraid of is not learning something from the mistakes and the gut punches that you take along the way.
Well said. Dan, you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think that everyone's afraid of failure. Everybody's afraid of personal embarrassment. Everyone's afraid of losing their investment or waking up one day and having nothing. I mean, these are just the realities of life. And as an entrepreneur, you have to have enough intestinal fortitude to say, in the face of that, I'm going to do it anyway, which gets back to conviction. If you absolutely believe in your strategy and your vision and your product and your market, then you weigh the odds. You still have a high probability of failure. That's the reality. You know, they say here the statistics, 95% of all new businesses fail. You have to believe that I'm the 5% that isn't going to fail.
Yeah.
And you have to recognize that you could fail, and you have to tell yourself, I can survive because I believe in this product enough that I'm willing to take that risk. If you're not, or you can't take the risk because you need the income, or you can't put your life savings into this project, then you're not ready.
Good point. Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to move on to the next question, the final question, which is, how do you ask your friends and family for funding? Dan, you want to take that? How do you do that?
I love you bring your dog. George, it's a hard thing to do because it's one thing to use your own money, but when you take friends and family money, you bear a great burden. It's a great responsibility and a great burden. The first thing I always say is, don't invest 1 penny more than you fully expect to lose.
Absolutely.
It's my first statement. Always. Don't even touch it with a stick unless this is discretionary funds that if you lose it, it's not going to make a difference. And then you have fun. Then have fun with me. If this is a critical amount of money, it's going to make a difference in your life and it has to be successful, then don't do it. So I try to talk people out of it, because people always want to know your idea, because everybody wants to be sort of, early stage of the next unicorn, right? They always think the one that got away. So, they're interested, and then you ask them for money, and they say, if you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice. And anyway, that's my perspective. I think that if you believe enough in your business and you have the leadership skills to articulate the value proposition, then just talk to people. You don't have to be, it can be a very soft sell. I'm interested in raising capital. Would this be of interest to you? They say it could be, and how much do you need? And I say, I'm trying to raise a certain X amount. And I'd love you to participate, but please listen to me very carefully. Don't invest one penny more than you fully expect to lose. And then they kind of get a little whiplash. Fully expect to lose. So my point. There's a high probability that I'm convinced it'll be successful. So is every entrepreneur. It's not always the case. And I'd love you to participate because we have a lot of fun. But if it isn't fun and if it's critical amount of money, then don't do it.
Yeah, I completely agree with Dan. I think it's important to consider that for any individual investors from whom you may be soliciting funds, that all the usual rules of solid portfolio management apply. So if you look at, for example, how registered investment advisors tend to manage their client portfolios, they'll take a client portfolio and divide it into a certain number of buckets characterized by risk and return. So for example, bonds, for example, U.S. Treasury bonds are thought of as very low risk, very low return in exchange for taking that risk investment instruments, and they'll allocate accordingly based on the investment objectives of that individual. Early stage investing like this is very potential high reward, but also very high risk. So this is not the type of investment that's appropriate for grandma who's on a fixed income taking her last $50,000 and rolling the bet on your company. It's got to fit into whoever these individuals are. It's got to fit into their asset allocation strategy. And to Dan's point, they've got to understand this is high risk, high return investing. So if it's a problem to lose 100% of it, don't take a penny of it.
Interesting. And is there a certain amount of reticence that you need to get over to be able to actually ask people, even if you are asking people who have money, their family or their friends, and maybe you don't want to bring them into your business, and again, that fear of failing. I mean, tell me about how to overcome emotions like that.
Well, it's interesting because raising money is essentially selling. And in fact, that's exactly what it is. You're selling securities. You're selling an interest in your company in exchange for cash. No different from if you were selling a widget as a product or a service. So you have to be comfortable with the sales approach, and you also have to be cognizant of the realities of what's known as the sales funnel or the sales pipeline, which is where typically you start with a lot of prospects, you narrow them down based on some criteria. Some of those may be your criteria, others may be the prospect's criteria. You talk to them and solicit their interest, and they're not interested, so they fall out of the pipeline. And just recognize that in order to get to an end state of the funnel where you have, say, X number of investors that ultimately end up investing in your startup, in order to get to that end point, you have to feed into the funnel 10 or 20x that number, because to a certain extent, again, like all sales, it's a numbers game.
Okay. Dan, you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm cool. It's good.
Okay. Well, we covered our 5 questions. If there are any questions from our audience, you can send them to me on the chat. Dan or Christy, are there other topics you want to bring up before we end that we didn't cover?
I know from my perspective, George, you and I and Dan all met beforehand, and I had a certain number of witticisms that I was hoping to be able to share in this context. And I think I've shared the ones that I thought were the most important to share. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I hope the audience finds it useful.
Okay. Okay, good. Daniel, do you want to give any witticisms or anything that you missed?
Well, George, I pulled out this little document I've written several years ago called the 25 Signs That You're an Entrepreneur, which I can cherry pick from or read. It's kind of funny.
Let's hear it. I think this would be great.
Yeah, let's hear it. Yeah, with the time we have left, not all 25, but pick out the best ones.
I don't know if I read fast. Okay. The thought of going out and getting a job is inconceivable. Number two, when faced with disaster, your first reaction is damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. You smile when somebody tells you your idea is stupid because they're not your competition. You never finish your business plan because the moment you do, it's obsolete.
Mhm.
You never, ever, ever refer to yourself as an entrepreneur. Like every other entrepreneur, you secretly fear you're about to be found out. You never strive for money, you strive for success because the money will follow. To you, safety and security are like a wet blanket. You graciously decline the round of golf. You have more important things to do. To you, a bag of Fritos is a balanced meal. There are no days of the week. There are no sick days. There are no weekends. There is no work day. Vacations are what other people take. You view a brick wall not as an impasse, but as a challenge. You believe that yes means yes and no means yes. When in doubt, speak with confidence. To you, uncertainty is the norm. You revel in it. You don't fear stress, you seek it. It is the absence of stress that you fear. You consider your home to be your second office. You love go-go because you can work on the long flight home. You view a good meal as a necessary interruption. If your wife doesn't support you, get a new wife. Okay, that's a little harsh. And finally, the very day after you sell your company for $1 gazillion, you pull out a blank sheet of paper and start all over again.
So
That's a
good, Dan.
great list. I love that.
That's a good list, really. I wonder how we could get that out to everybody. That would be great.
I was going to say, George, if you could circulate that when you post this on YouTube, I think that would be a great value add.
Fantastic, yeah.
I'll send it to you,
We
George.
have actually one question from Brett. Here, let me pose it. Dan mentioned going where the puck is headed, not where it's currently located. What do you think about the concept that is likely to be automated in the future, but AI and ML solutions is probably years away?
So it's an interesting question. The first thing I would say is find me any product, service, system, or walk of life that is still manual and burdensome and troublesome. If it hasn't been automated, it will, you know? So you talk about where the puck is headed, right? It's a classic, right? And we've done that a lot over the years. You know, I love to think of markets that need automation, right?
Sure.
You know, very fundamentally, anything that be automated and simplified through technology. That's why I love technology, is because you can take a manual process and automate it, and bang,
Right.
you've got, you know, and a lot of people don't understand the benefit of automation until you lay it out for them. But you know, that's always a question I ask is, you know, what is the you know, sort of status quo today, and can we improve it through blank systems, technology, an assembly line, hordes of people doing manual labor? I don't know.
Well, certainly that's been happening in fintech, right? I mean, it's all been for the last 15 years, automating
Right.
back office processes, taking people and paper out of a process. It's happening now in the insurance business in a big way. InsurTech is growing gangbusters because that industry is a little bit behind the banking industry, but both of them have automated just like everything that possibly could be automated.
Right.
Chris, you want to add anything to that?
I think that was a great statement. That was a very, I think, thoughtful answer on Dan's part.
Yep. Okay, great. Okay, well, I think we're at the end here. We're running out of time. So I just wanted to mention, first, thank you for joining us. Dan, Chris, thank you very much for being such fantastic speakers. I think this last hour has been really wonderful. Our next meeting is going to be on monetizing data, our real world examples. I don't know about you, but I hear a lot of discussion about monetizing data in banking, and it just never seems to get down to the point where people are saying real world examples. It's always very theoretical. We have 3 speakers that are actually doing this. Mark Harrison from Infosys, Andy Schmidt from CGI, and Bruce Hrobat, who's the CEO of Interday Insights. These 3 folks are actually working with their clients, or in the case of Bruce, have a product that actually monetizes data, and they're getting benefits of it today. So the date of it has not been scheduled yet, but it'll be in early September. So we hope you can join us for that. Dan and Chris, thank you very much. Nadia, thank you very much for your help as well. And I hope everybody enjoyed the hour.
Thank you, George.
Good luck to all the entrepreneurs out there.
Right. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.